We are on the internet. How's my audio?
Hey, you're sounding good, Brett.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
Nothing like a little technical hiccup during the beginning of your live stream to make you nervous. Like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? Audio's not working.
We're pros here. We roll with all those waves, right?
But we make no guarantees. So if you were out there watching, you wouldn't know it. But 7 years ago or 6 years ago, when we started this thing, oh my gosh, there was like every month there was some failure. Like mic's too hot, mic's too low. It's just it was always something. Were you around when we had the 45-minute limit? Like we would get into the limit to the stream in like 45 minutes in, the whole thing would crash. Yeah, we had that.
I guarantee you still had to log into YouTube again.
Yes, always. Google likes to log me out in the middle of our stream so that YouTube suddenly stops working and I can't chat with anyone. It's a feature, not a bug. It's a feature.
Speaking of which, Yeah. What is this? Where are people at right now?
So, hello everyone in chat. We want to hear from you. This is why we do this live, is for you to ask questions of our guests, for Nirmal to make witty comments about I don't know, my hair today is not, I don't know what it is.
You're looking
Feeling a little
great.
bit under the weather. But Nirmal and I are going to see each other in like 3
Like 48
days.
hours? 48 hours? A little
72,
bit more?
72.
72
72.
hours.
So there's a Docker Captain Summit in Portugal next week. So if you're sometimes we have captains showing up in the chat. So we're blessed by the captains here. And if all of you are out there, then I can't wait to see you. Hopefully we'll high five, and we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna do some AI stuff. We're gonna talk about new Docker features.
Are we gonna high five?
No.
There we go.
Good.
All righty.
Okay.
So, real quick, where can people find out about this show and upcoming shows and the podcast and all that jazz?
So a couple of new things. Well, one, this isn't new. We've had a podcast forever. We've had hundreds of episodes of a podcast, and this is the live stream recording of that podcast. So you get to see it live here first. It turns into a podcast, and now this is the audio podcast, by the way. Like you can scroll to your heart's content, and you see this one right here. We had this one recently, K2D by Portainer. It was a really cool idea of a project. Basically, the partial Kubernetes API running on top of Docker without a Kubernetes control plane. What? Like,
Yes.
if you're curious about what that is or why it exists,
Mind being blown.
there is an audio episode. But now, thanks to Christy, my wonderful editor, we are putting these back out on YouTube as edited podcasts. So it gets a custom intro. It gets some fancy graphics. It's dope. And we've been working on it for way too long. I have a little bit of perfectionism going on here. But you can finally now watch these episodes on YouTube as they are here, but we trimmed like 20 minutes of ums and uhs and my stutters out of it. So it's a much better show. And that's what we do. And that's what we'll do with this show when we're done, is we'll put it up as a podcast and put that. Also, the way you know about all this stuff is get on the newsletter, Bret.news, or just my website. All the details are below. You can check out the newsletter, and we are slowly moving to Substack. So eventually that will happen at some point.
A lot of breaking news. So we got
things are changing around here.
Audio. We got the newsletter. We've got the video podcast, right?
Yeah.
On YouTube, and also moving to Substack. And then if you want to continue this conversation and hang out with folks that are talking about all kinds of topics, like everything from Gen AI to Kubernetes to Docker Swarm to DevOps to
80s tech memes.
Network,
we have retro tech. We have retro tech channels.
To networking, which is what we're going to be talking a little bit about today on today's show. So if check out the Discord.
By the way,
Brett,
if we went into the networking section,
let's both point upwards to the Discord.
Yes, this is where 19,000 DevOps people hang out in Discord and chat every day. I can't keep up. People. Thank you for being a part of our community. This is a lot of fun. By the way, if we went in the networking one and I searched for Traefik, it would probably be like every 10th tweet or every 10th post in here. Traefik is a common thing we talk about. It's in my courses. It's probably mentioned in Silicon Valley, even though that's a great show. If you should watch that. Let's get to it.
If right before that, if y'all like the content that Brett and myself are creating, you like the guests, you want to get involved, tell your friends, tell your family, tell the random people on the street to check out the podcast, to check out the live stream, and the classic line, like and subscribe, so that we know that you're there and that you're listening and that we continue to do this for you. And on that note, Brett, again, the Traefik theme comes up all the time in the Discord. So who do we have on the show today?
Well, if I had a drum roll, I'd say drum roll. This person in the middle that you may recognize from a whole lot of YouTube videos about Traefik. over the years. Emile Vauge. I may have slightly mispronounced the last name, but I'm going to practice later and get that right in the recording. So, Christy, let's fix that in post. Emile is here, and we were talking before the show of how I feel like I've been circling his orbit ever since 2015 when he invented the project, but we've never actually met. So I'm very excited to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Super happy.
Yeah, so we've already, see, I told you, I was like, we're going to get some Swarm fans in here. And before the show had even started, we have people on the show talking about Swarm. In fact, we have now, speaking of Swarm, we have now actually a Swarm bi-monthly meetup. Check the Discord if you're interested in Swarm. It seems like there's a little bit of an increase in usage lately as people start to understand Kubernetes and realize they don't need it. So we didn't have a Swarm channel in my Discord server for the longest time. It was just in the Docker one, and finally people were like, "Look, we got maintainers in here now from Swarm. Let's make it official." So we made an official channel, and now we have a bi-monthly meetup run by OnSecure right over there. Hello, Martin. This person. Yep. So. We talk about Traefik a lot in there because Traefik is one of the few proxies that works native with Swarm. So we're going to talk about that and how that changes in 3.0. But Emile, get us started off with, just for those that maybe either are just new to Traefik or have been using Traefik a while but maybe don't know the origin story. How did this all get started? What itch were you scratching?
So yeah, it was back in 2015, as you said. And I was a developer at that time for quite some time, and I was working on microservices, setting up microservices platform at that time. And if you remember, in 2015 there was not so much tooling around here, right? Docker was starting, Kubernetes was not even here. So yeah, it was not that great. And basically, I had to expose dynamically microservices on the internet. And that's how I had the idea to create a brand new reverse proxy from scratch that would do it dynamically, automatically. And that's how I bootstrapped Traefik on GitHub. And in a few weeks, it became super popular, which was kind of extremely unexpected.
Right.
So yeah, it became, from a side project, it became a community project in a few weeks, in a few months. And that's then I made the decision to found the company, Traefik Labs, just to be able to, to grow the project, grow the community, and make it better.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, you like I remember learning about you from a GopherCon, basically the Go language, for those of you that aren't in that little ecosystem, Docker was written in Go, Kubernetes was written in Go, and then you come out with a proxy written in Go. And I remember being very new to Go as a language at that time, and I just knew it was the new hot thing, but I wasn't writing stuff in it yet. And then you came out with this proxy. And I thought, we're rewriting the internet. We're writing everything in the new Go language. And when you had this idea around a proxy that could speak directly to the Docker and then eventually the Kubernetes APIs, to me that was a foundational shift, because it meant that my proxy was going to be so much smarter than sort of shimming an old 90s, early 2000s web proxy into the role of being sprinkled all over my orchestration and my clusters. Of course, at that time, clusters were new, or orchestration was new, and I feel like you were so ahead of the game. And it's exciting to be here. What are we talking? 9 years later, talking about the 3.0 major upgrades. So, where you've done a lot. The company's done lots of stuff over the years. You've released other products. What's the road to 3.0 like? I know you've been talking about it for years. I feel like as one of the Traefik ambassadors, we were hearing rumblings about it over a year ago, and maybe a year and a half ago even. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long road. Basically, it's always complex to deal with dozens or hundreds of contributions from the community and end up with a brand new major release. It's a very long process. You have to test everything. You have to be sure that it makes sense to avoid breaking change in that place, to be okay with breaking changes other places. So it's a very long process. And it took a while to move from V2 to V3, and we wanted to have a great feature set basically for the V3. And I remember that at the end of 2023, we were just about to release the RC, and of course, a great new feature came in from the community, which I will talk
Always.
about in a minute. It's always the case, but this one was really great. It was the integration of WebAssembly, Wasm, for plugins. And we thought, okay, this one is great. Let's just postpone a little bit the the release. So that's the way you it takes a long time to release a major release. So yeah, that was a long process.
Yeah.
It's interesting to kind of contrast that. I was just we just did a celebration of Kubernetes 10-year birthday yesterday locally at a meetup, and we were looking at the commits to the releases of Kubernetes in its first year, and it was 20 releases. So they were just cutting a release every 2 weeks essentially, which is an insane speed.
Right.
Um, that initial kind of innovation, but you get to a point, and maybe you can speak to this, where folks want stability. Right now we have, like, in the Kubernetes world, it's like 3 releases a year, right? And so is Traefik at that point where you're focused more on stability, making sure the features are really well baked in, the users and the customers can rely on it, and with with no breaking changes, things like that? How has that matured in terms of balancing that with also innovation and introducing new things?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the early days of Traefik. We were exactly following the same, the same trend of Kubernetes, like releasing every 2 weeks or
Yeah.
almost, continuously. And this is great for the beginning because you innovate, you need to be quick, you need to be fast, and that's great. But of course, at some point, you need to be production ready. So that's why we ended up following the semantic versioning. I mean, umbrella. And of course, as soon as you do that, I mean, it's okay to be breaking, but it has to be a major release. Uh, so yeah. Anyway, we do release every, minor release with new features every, let's say, 3 times or 4 times a year usually. That's the usual trend. But of course, a major release takes much more time to
Yeah.
set up. Because it's the right moment to change the architecture, to be more effective, to change to do big things, right? That you started and you were doing in the background. So yeah, that's not the same thing.
Yeah. So speaking of which, actually, we just got a really good question, and this could not think of a better segue. uh, Martin asks another one: when upgrading from Traefik 3.0 from 2.0 with Docker Swarm, what's a nice way to gradually do that without downtime? And we had that on the agenda today to talk about, like, what's the migration path um, from different versions of Traefik to the latest.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so the migration from V2 to V3 was a key topic for the maintainer team, because we really wanted. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of production instances of Traefik all over the world. So clearly, you don't want to you want to simplify the
Yeah.
life of everyone, and you don't want downtime. You don't want anything like that. So we came up with a strategy to deal with this migration. So maybe I can share my screen with the and start with the documentation. So if you go on the doc web page of Traefik, you have a migration section and a Traefik v2 to v3 migration guide. So we spend a lot of time writing this. So basically, this first page is, list all the steps you have to follow to make the migration smooth. And you have another page where it lists all the changes we've made between v2 to v3, all the breaking changes, what you have to change. So basically, you have to follow 3 steps. First of all, migrate your static configuration, and that's usually pretty easy because we made some minor changes. And for example, I know this one will be interesting for many of you because we splitted the Docker provider and the Swarm provider into 2 different providers. So before you had everything into one, and now you have 2 different providers. So if you are using Swarm, basically, now you need to use a Swarm provider. So nothing else changed. So basically, it's just like 5 characters to change in your config file, but that's it. And we did that because it was the old provider was getting extremely complex to maintain and prone to bugs. So yeah, we made the decision to simplify this part. Anyway, so first of all, you need to list all the changes you have to make to the static configuration. So that's the list is here. Honestly, they are pretty minor, and for most people, it should be it should stay the same. And for some people, you should maybe change 1 or 2 things, 1 or 2 lines. So that's not a big thing. And then the most important part is how to deal with the change we made in the dynamic configuration, because many users have dozens, hundreds of containers, pods that are deployed through Traefik. And this is way more complex. For example, if you do some changes in the ingress format or in the Docker labels format, that's a lot more work to do to migrate. So that's why we made an option to be compatible with v2 syntax, and that's simply the option you need to use. So in your static configuration, you just use this option, and all your dynamic configuration will be compatible with the v3 Traefik v3. So you will have nothing to change. So that's what we wanted to achieve.
Nice.
It's okay to have some changes, but you need to be able to make people's life simpler. And with that, it's possible to migrate progressively all your ingresses or all your labels to the new format. And again, there are no big changes. A few things here and there that have been revamped, but that was the whole philosophy, to be able to migrate progressively, and that's a big difference.
Yeah, that's really cool. I don't remember. I was trying to remember my V1 to V2 migration, and I don't remember that having that option. I remember it being different.
Yes. Yeah, it was. Even at the time, we've been working hard on it, but it was not sufficient because we didn't provide a way to migrate progressively the dynamic configuration, and that's where usually you struggle, because when you have to migrate like 200 ingresses at the same time, it's just not possible. Okay, so you need to be able to migrate one after the other progressively, and that's what is new with Traefik v3.
It's critical for production network traffic, for sure. Do we want to go into some of the questions, Bret?
Yeah, I feel like Martin's question kind of got answered there. I'm just going to repeat it all and see if Emile has any other comments. Another one: when upgrading from Traefik 3.0 from 2.0 Docker Swarm switch, is there a nice way to do gradually without downtime? Can I already create? So we kind of answered those questions. So could I right now just upgrade to Traefik v3, but I set it to v2 syntax, and my current swarm labels will stay working? So yeah, that's that. We answered that. And then I do the gradual switch, or will there be an issue with the naming of the provider? Oh, so he's talking about Swarm specifically, like
Yeah.
having to change out the Swarm provider.
So for Swarm specifically, yes, you need to change the of provider. You need to use the Swarm provider in v3, but then all your labels, if you use the this option, default rule syntax v2, all your labels should be compatible, which is the most important.
Right. Yeah. So one, we have a guide. Like
Yes.
you made a guide.
Yeah.
I don't remember if you had put up a YouTube video yet, but I remember that you all did a webinar last month, and you stepped through some of the details of it, but we didn't actually get into the nitty gritty of the guide. By the way, random, I just noticed you're about to hit 50,000 GitHub stars. That's pretty dope.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So not only V3, but 50K. All right, so we
That's
have
amazing.
a migration guide. There was one other question. Oh, Conrad had a slightly different question, not specifically about migrations, but he said, are there any updates to testing Traefik production deployments? Not sure what I'm not sure what that means.
Not sure to understand. Yeah, exactly. Are there any updates to testing?
Yeah, Conrad, do you mean like
new feature to test in production?
Testing deploying Traefik into Kubernetes? Yeah. Or testing your apps on Traefik, maybe? Not sure what you mean by testing exactly. I'm assuming you're not talking about testing inside of building Traefik. But
yeah,
get back to us. We'll come back to it. All right. So migration. Do you feel like there's any big? I mean, other than what you've already mentioned, are there any other big gotchas or things to look out for?
I mean, for this migration, no. And I guess I encourage people to have a look to this guide. We spend a lot of time writing it and try to think about every use case. It's not easy, but we tried. So if you are stuck into something you can't deal with, don't hesitate to open an issue. We will have a look and we'll complete the guide or fix the guide because we really want everyone to be happy with this migration. But again, we tried everything to make it simple.
Awesome. And since it's on the docs, I would imagine that feedback is always welcome, right? So if you're going through that guide and testing it out, and you have some feedback, open up a PR or an issue in the docs right there. It looks like at the top right, you could probably pull up the docs and migration guide, so everyone can benefit from learning from the migration that you're doing out there. Yeah. So you mentioned Wasm really briefly with respect to V3. Can you tell us more about that last minute awesome feature that came at the end of the year that kind of slipped in under the wire? Can you go into what that's all about?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, so yeah, we have been building a plugin engine for Traefik a few years ago, and it was based on a Go interpreter that we wrote from scratch, which was called Yagi. So basically, we wrote a Golang interpreter to be able to have plugins, extensions into Traefik, and it was great. We have a plugin marketplace with more than hundreds of plugins. So that's used in production for customers, etc. But someone came in 2023 saying, hey, maybe it would be great to also have an option with Wasm as a plugin engine. And we were like, I mean, sure. if you can help on that, yes, would be great. And Wasm, if you don't know what Wasm is or WebAssembly, it's a great technology that allows you to define, let's say, portable binary code that is able to basically run everywhere. It can be a server, it can be a browser. First, it was created to run in a browser. And the good thing is this binary code can be generated from pretty much any language in the world. So from any language, you can write something that is executable on anything. So that's a huge thing. That's a huge technology. And the great thing is that someone integrated WebAssembly into Traefik. So now you are able to build a plugin in Wasm within Traefik. So that's just great because you can use a different language than Golang, which is great. And also the Wasm engine is having great performance. Wasm is almost native performance for those who don't know. So that's a huge benefit. So, it's always impressive to see this kind of contribution in the last minute coming into the roadmap. And at the end of the day, it's one of the key feature of the V3. So the other interesting thing is that we have been building the first Wasm plugin, and we wanted something big. We have been working hand in hand with another open source project, which is Corasa, another Golang open source project. And basically, Corasa is an enterprise grade web application firewall. And it is fully compliant with the mod security seclang language. So you can run also core rule set provided by OWASP. So that's pretty dope because thanks to this integration, you can have a web application firewall right into Traefik thanks to this Wasm plugin, and you can basically increase a lot the security of your reverse proxy. So that's a great first Wasm plugin, I guess.
Yeah. I'm curious, does this mean that you have a Wasm runtime built into the Traefik engine?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm just curious, which one did you pick one? Like, I know there's more than a few.
The one we picked the one in Go, but the biggest technical decision to make is which Wasm API we had to choose, which is basically the let's say the binary interface, and there are many. So we made the decision to use HTTP Wasm, which is the most complete in our opinion to handle HTTP requests. So that's the decision we had to make, and we are about to contribute a major new feature on this API on HTTP Wasm. So yeah, it should get better pretty soon.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
Yeah, there's several of us. Well, there's more than a few, but
dozens.
Nigel Poulton, a friend of both of ours, he's all into Wasm right now. So we've been discussing back and forth what we're calling cloud native WebAssembly, running on Kubernetes, running on Docker for a couple of years now. And, of course, it feels like that a lot of the limitations are just from the WebAssembly itself and being able to speak HTTP and multi-threading and all the things that people they get excited about WebAssembly for their apps, and then they find out there's these limitations, and they maybe reduce their excitement a little bit. And so it's cool to see the continued pace of teams in various ways figuring out how to take advantage of WebAssembly on the server side. I think for those of us that are watching, if you're watching out there and you're like, well, wait, WebAssembly is in the browser, what are we talking about? There's this whole thing now where we're actually putting it into the server, and now it's in the proxy, and it's on Kubernetes, and it's in Docker, so it's all on the server side, and it allows us to build once, run anywhere. And there's a separate video for that. When we edit this show down, we'll put a link to the other video that Nigel and I made a year and a half ago. But it's an exciting future for containers in general, is that we're able to use WebAssembly whenever we feel like it. All right, so we've got the WAF thing. We could honestly spend a whole hour talking about WAF and WAF and proxies. I actually have a team, good friends of mine that are building their own WAF in the Ruby ecosystem, and they're actually extending it to a whole bunch of other things. Maybe we're going to have them on the show eventually to talk about WAFs for developers instead. Probably I don't know anything about Karaza. Is that what it's called? Karaza?
Yeah.
Is that how you say it?
Karaza.
Yeah, they sound similar to the product my friends are making, and I feel like we're maybe starting to get into the point where developers can start considering WAFs a part of their dependencies. And I don't want to get into this now because honestly, we could have a separate show about it. But I'm excited that WAFs have always been this networking security team. Yeah. It's out of the developers' hands, and they don't really have any. They don't know what's going on. It's transparent to them, and their apps are on the back end. And now that we can do some of this stuff maybe in the proxy, where maybe developers have a little bit more control, I feel like we're slowly yet another thing that the developers have to do for their apps. But I think it's a good thing because it gives them power, gives them visibility into maybe what these firewalls are doing for their apps. So I'm just generally excited about anything that adds WAF support, regardless of the tool. So thank you for waiting to put that in. That's exciting stuff.
Wasm WAFs. We
Exactly.
need one more
Wasm
W.
WAFs.
We need one more W word. So did we want to go into a bit? Did you want to show off what that looks like, or do we want to take some questions?
Yeah, maybe questions because
okay. No worries.
I may show off different stuff later.
So speaking of, we'll take some questions, and then we got such a big agenda. Where we're probably going to go into another show at some point. So in terms of what's the gRPC support looking like these days with respect to Traefik?
So I mean, Traefik is fully compatible with gRPC, and that's a good transition because we are also fully compatible with Gateway API from Kube, which is, which has a lot to do with also gRPC because there is a whole gRPC section in Gateway API. So yeah, same thing. We are fully compliant with Gateway API. It's one of the key features of Traefik v3. So maybe some of you don't know what Gateway API is. So maybe I can explain quickly what it is.
Yeah, go for it. Just before we do that, Bret, do you remember the last time on your show you talked about Gateway API? I should probably know the answer to this, but it's been a long time. Right?
We had Google on the show in like 2021, I think, or maybe even late 2020, talking about the pre-alpha or alpha stage Gateway API. We didn't. I remember, Nirmal, when you and I were at KubeCon last year, I was writing down notes that we need to get someone on the show about Gateway API 1.0. Did I hear that 1.1 is coming out? I feel like I've heard something new recently.
Maybe it has been out for a month already.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's been a while, Emile. So let's go into what is this Gateway API thing?
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, indeed. I mean, basically, if you go into the history of that, everything started with Kubernetes at the beginning and Ingress. Ingress is the specification to expose pods on the internet, and it is vendor neutral, so it's a way to expose the a resource, whatever the Ingress controller, the reverse proxy is behind. That's theoretically because
Yes.
it in real life it's not the case, because usually the thing is, the ingress specification was super basic, super easy to
Yes.
understand, but super basic, and lacks a lot of features.
Hmm.
And as soon as you wanted to do the routing slightly differently from the basic stuff, you had to use vendor annotations, which ruins basically the the neutrality of the resource. So
Hmm.
yeah, and it has a lot of limitations, only HTTP, etc., etc. So they started to think about Ingress v2 very early, like probably in 2016, 17. It was really early, even though Ingress were not final at that time. And it failed once, and then it came up later with Gateway API, and it was a different name at the time. It was Service API or API Service or whatever,
Hmm.
and it took a while to end up to a final version, which was 2023 last year. Gateway API ended up in 1.0, at least a final version, which is great because it's a brand new version to expose resources on Kube. It is vendor neutral, and as you might expect, it's much more advanced than Ingress, so you can do advanced stuff. It is not only HTTP compatible, but TCP, UDP. You can do gRPC stuff, etc., etc. So that's great. You can have some filtering on that,
Hmm.
and you can extend also this specification with custom tools. So that's great. That's really what everyone was expecting, basically,
Yes.
to expose that.
And
And in
just as a
short, yeah.
Yeah, just as a
Sorry, go
side
ahead.
note, I think the limitations of that initial ingress was also a forcing function for a lot of folks to look into service meshes to kind of get that additional functionality and feature set.
Yeah.
But at that time, service meshes also came with a large amount of overhead, both on the
Mm.
operations side, the sidecar resource side, and configuration complexity. So I think both of those two trends kind of coalesced into the Gateway API standard, if you will, within the
Yeah.
Kubernetes community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have
So
a question
that's,
real quick. Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
On that last slide, it mentions ingress is deprecated, but that's not because of Kubernetes. Are you saying that Traefik is deprecating the ingress support? Sorry, I'm not.
Oh, no, no, no. No, no, but in Cube, it is deprecated because they want to move to the Gateway API. So they won't stop, I guess, Ingress before quite some time, because it's a
Right.
huge
It just
thing.
came.
But
It just went.
yeah,
I say just. It was 119, which I guess was like 4 years ago.
no,
But yeah, I think it went GA or something like in 119. I
yeah,
just know that
exactly.
because I had to update all my courses for 1.0 Ingress because it changed subtle little things that broke all of my courses. But I want to hit on that point for real quick, just because I feel like this is like a PSA. We've been using Ingress for years. Like you said, it was, I think in the note in there, it was not, theoretically it was supposed to be vendor neutral, but reality is everybody was putting in annotations and separate things that would end up breaking when you moved from one to the other. So it never really worked well unless you were in the most basic, simplest scenario that's good for
Yep.
demos or good for courses that you're taking. And that most of us all would learn to move to your, or like any other proxies, your own specific resource that you would create. And it's funny because I think every client I would try to implement Kubernetes for, they all started wishing they could stick with Ingress. They're like, I believe the dream. I want the dream. I'm going to do Ingress. And then eventually they end up with all this text that's in their YAML that's not checked. There's a lot of potential for issues and bugs because it's just annotations. I don't think I realized that it was going to actually officially be deprecated at some point. So,
Yep.
do you think that the Gateway API is more complicated for basic setups? I've actually been concerned about this because I haven't run it in production yet for anybody, And so I was concerned that the migration to Gateway, that and tools like Traefik, if people that were used to smaller, simpler setups were going to be overwhelmed by the perceived complexity of Gateway API. Do you see that as being an issue? I don't actually have any experience, so.
Really, I don't think so. I can show you here on the screen a super basic ingress. It exposes an ingress on this domain name, on this path to this service, right? And if you take the same Gateway API, the equivalent, it is slightly longer, but I can explain why, because you have something that is not you don't need to do this in every file, but overall, it is extremely simple too, right? The most important part is here, which is where you really create your route, your HTTP route, to expose your services on this host name. So yeah, overall, I don't think the complexity is an issue. But the thing is, if you want to expose HTTP route, it's not an issue. But of course, if you want to use every features of Gateway API, then you will have some things to learn, right? Because, for example, you can expose HTTP route, you can expose TLS route, which is important. You can also have a TLS configuration for the backend services in case you want your reverse proxy to talk TLS to your backend services. So you need to think about that. You can have some gRPC route. You can have some filtering on top of every route. So many people were already using filtering, like you want to alter the request within the reverse proxy, for example, within the ingress controller or the gateway controller. So you need some filtering to do that. That's super useful, but you will need to learn all this new notation. Honestly, it's not. As soon as you are doing using Kubernetes, you are using YAML all day long. So it's not. It's just a bit more YAML, right?
Yeah, and I guess if most of us are actually using ingress route, I'm going to guess that because it had a little bit more YAML than just ingress. I think.
Yeah.
It feels like it. Would you say that it's more of just a translation and not like? I'm actually curious. Does your Gateway API support? Is that turn out to be an actual superset of the ingress route that you previously offered?
So ingress route was not vendor neutral because it was made by Traefik.
Right.
So the idea is that we wanted to avoid everyone to use dozens of annotation because it was unsafe, unreliable, and a nightmare to maintain. So we came up with a structured CRD, a custom CRD, which was the ingress route. And basically, you can mostly translate what's in an ingress route to a gateway API. It's not the same thing, of course, but basically you get the same IDs or the same concept almost. So yeah, that's for all the people who are using ingress route, it's not a big deal. You will recognize the same concept.
Can you go back?
So sorry. Go ahead, Nirmal.
Can you just go back one and just kind of go through the components of the Gateway API in terms of what pieces need to be configured? Because then we can see how simple it is.
Yeah, and that's this is highlighting one key issue we haven't talked about ingress yet, is that within ingress resources you had information that were usually handled by developers and other information that were owned by ops or platform engineer. That everything was mixed in the same file, which is an absolute nightmare to maintain. And so Gateway API is also solving this issue because it comes with different objects that are owned by different people, different personas. So for example, it comes with a gateway class and gateway, Those are two resources that are handled by ops or platform engineers. So gateway class is a way to define which ingress controller, which gateway controller, will expose those. Will implement the API, the gateway API, and the gateway is basically defining the port, the external port. So if you want to expose on port 80, on port 443, this will be in the gateway object. So typically, this is what is handled by ops. And
Yes. Right.
the
Cluster
rest
admins.
of objects, exactly, cluster admins. And other objects on the other end are handled by devs usually, which are HTTP routes, TLS routes, which are connected to services, right? So that's a good way to split, objects between persona. And if we want to get into the details between the difference between ingress and gateway APIs, as you can see on the left, you have your typical ingress, right? So the usual routing part, so that's the simple part. The usual annotation part, which is the complex part, because you want to have some specific vendor options. The TLS part, which is okay, and then you want to have also some. If you want to use some vendor filters or vendor middlewares, you will have other parts which are not part of the ingress resources. And if you go on the gateway API, then it's a lot more. It's a bit longer, but it's a lot easier to deal with because you don't have any annotations that are not structured, and everything is in the right place. So you have, first of all, the gateway part. So as I said, it is where you say, hey, this gateway controller will expose the port 443, the port 80, and that's it. So that's this part. And the other part is the routing, okay, that you declare. So it is connected to your gateway, and it is using this host name, this rule matching, and you can have some filtering here. So there are two types of filters. The filters that comes in the specification. So there are core filters like if you want to modify some headers, there is a specific filters for that because it's super common, etc. And you can create your own filters in your gateway controller, and that's what we are doing at Traefik Labs. We have a bunch of middlewares that are custom filters, and that comes here as in the green part. We declare a middleware, which is traffic resources that is referenced as an extension ref in gateway API. So yeah, as you can see, it's not more complex, but there is a better structure. Less chance to get mistakes, less chance to get bugs, more validation, and also a better split of the personas.
Yeah, I like the idea of mapping the configuration elements to personas and areas of concern, and then also moving the configuration that's most applicable to the application closer to the application itself, and the cluster configuration because all these things also change at different paces, right? You might not be changing what port your gateway is at very frequently.
Right, that might be like one time when you set up the cluster and you never touch that again. So
right, and in the previous way, you would have to essentially go through all of the ingresses and make sure that things were configured properly if you wanted to change that. And so these things can change at a different pace, and also they can be rationalized closer to the application itself if you're following best practices and keeping these configurations. So, wow, we covered a lot of ground already. Do we want to do we have some questions, or do you want to kind of go through
maybe two
rest
more?
Yeah,
two
sure,
more
go for
things
it.
on Gateway API because this is moving very fast. I mean, it is extremely active on Cube right now.
Hmm.
This is super active, as you said, 1.0 last year in December or October, 1.1 earlier this year. So it's moving very fast. And I wanted to introduce you to two tools that are currently work in progress. Wait a minute. Okay, here we are. The first one is Gateway Kernel. I don't know how do you want to pronounce, but basically it's a command line tool for Gateway API, and that's pretty handy because, for example, if you want to deploy, let me show my screen just one sec. If you want to deploy uh, some gateways, APIs. So here I just deployed this one. You can use the gateway CTL to show you all your HTTP routes within this place. So the HTTP routes, TCP routes, everything that is deployed within Cube, you can have access to that thanks to this simple command line, and that's pretty handy because you can have a quick access to what is exposed on your cluster. So I think
Yeah.
that's pretty great. And the other tool I wanted to show is Ingress 2 Gateway, which is super interesting, super active project, and as the naming is pretty self-explanatory. It
Hmm.
allows you to convert your ingress to Gateway API resources. Yeah, super useful if you want to test and if you want to move to this new specs.
Yeah. Awesome. And it looks like that first tool, that's a plugin for kubectl, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a plugin yet, but it is aimed to become a plugin in the future. Yes.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
seem
if
to
you,
remember. Sorry, I was going to just make a comment. I seem to remember there was uh, there was something on the Kubernetes blog about the Gateway API being like the most collaborative feature addition in Kubernetes history or something like that. So I don't remember the exact headline. I was kind of looking for it. There's just a ton of stuff on the blog right now. I mean, like they're talking a lot about Gateway API lately. So it's cool to see that this has actually just been a general frustration for people for a long time, and that we actually not only did we come together to create Kubernetes as an ecosystem, but we continue to add new features that, and, I mean, there's a lot of players that have
Mhm.
involvement with HTTP and other traffic, traffic normal spelled, other traffic coming into their cluster, and you know, and there's a lot of desire for us to all live that dream of a single config that runs in every cloud and every cluster. So it's fun to see our attempts at, you know, maybe this is the second or third attempt, depending on who's counting, at trying to crack this hard nut around, make it easy enough for a small team of like three, that what I call the solo DevOps engineer, to actually do this work, but also give it tons of flexibility. So if you are, you know, if you are Tesla and you are trying to deploy and you have an ops team and a SRE team and you have a dev team, all these different dev teams, and everybody's got a limit. You are, you know, I don't want you to overwrite my blog URL in the proxy accidentally and ruin my website. Like all these different
Mhm.
things that I've watched teams kind of accidentally do over the years, and then realize they need a better plan, and then they set up all sorts of rules around, you can't write to this file because if you do, you might ruin this cluster. We're scared of this file because it controls a precious resource. Um, it's just I think it's been a challenge, particularly for larger teams over the years, and it's cool to see that
Yeah.
this doesn't look too hard to me on for first glance. I again, like Nirmal was saying, I haven't looked at this in 3, maybe even 4 years, and it doesn't seem overwhelming. So I'm excited to I'm just now thinking I'm going to have to update all the courses. I'm going to have to put all this stuff in there and move from Ingress over to Gateway API yet again in multiple courses.
But this time around, I think the Gateway API looks closer to what makes sense for a large amount of the people that are using Kubernetes. Like, I think there have been many and this is why it's an open source community, and that this is why these things are successful. Like they're experiments. There's the initial attempt at defining ingress. It worked for simple use cases, and the community responded and evolved to meet the actual needs of all the users in the community with respect to one of the most important things in your microservices environment, which is trying to get traffic in to those services and exposing your services to whoever you need to. So thank you for that overview of the Gateway API. If you're out there and you have not looked at your ingress resources, you haven't looked at any of the networking around this space in 4 years like Bret, highly recommend you start looking at the Gateway API now, because the ingress resources are definitely on a deprecation path, and this is where the whole entire community is essentially going to.
Yeah, I'm thinking it'll be 5 years before they turn it off, but yeah.
And if you are starting with Kubernetes, I would definitely recommend to just use Gateway API and not even look at ingress.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
that's a good tip. Also, like
look
if
at
you
Traefik v3.
Exactly.
Nirmal mentioned earlier, Nirmal mentioned something about picking a service mesh because you maybe needed a feature that now is built into Traefik 3 or in Ingress or in Gateway API rather. So this is kind of like, I'm sure that if you've actually deployed a service mesh, you're probably using a lot of MTLS and other features that aren't there in all of this, but I'm a big fan of reducing complexity. So if you're using a complex tool now, this might be a simpler way to manage all of your ingress. I mean,
and
now,
by the way,
see,
there is
ahead,
a service mesh also. There is a service mesh part in the Gateway API specs
Oh.
also. Yeah.
Okay.
So even more complex. No, yeah.
Why
So
not?
I
Let's
focused
just
on the
keep adding more
I focused
features.
on the I focused on the ingress part of the.
Yes.
But there is also a service mesh part that is covered by this spec. So it's an attempt to have a unified way to declare service mesh configuration.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't. This wasn't in the notes, but a real quick question. We're not here to talk about Traefik mesh necessarily, but are there new, like, Traefik mesh? To me, I'm just going to call it the simple service mesh. Is that? I don't know if that's a simpler.
Yeah. We haven't been working lately on mesh because we were really focused on Traefik v3, to be honest. So the whole team was just focused on that. So maybe we'll come back to mesh later. But to be honest, there is so much work to do on Traefik already that I won't commit.
Yeah. We'll have you back on the show to talk about Traefik mesh when you're ready. You let us know. And we'll have you back, just because service mesh, like that's easily another whole hour of conversation.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
It's different problems.
OpenTelemetry. Are we ready to talk about OpenTelemetry, Nirmal? I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, sure.
Throw in that?
We can. That's a good transition, because another thing that folks use a service mesh for is to get telemetry from, like, easier telemetry from their services without having to modify their application. It's a similar use case to eBPF, right? Where we're seeing an eBPF adoption just for that no touch auto instrumentation or telemetry coming directly from your applications about your application without having to modify the application. Can you tell us a little bit about what the observability story is? Of course, network observability is super important. It's probably the number one thing that a lot of the customers I talk to are interested in seeing as their first telemetry past, CPU memory, disk, that kind of thing. Yeah. But network is like, number one, number two on the observability front. So can you dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, network telemetry is super important, and especially the telemetry you get from an ingress controller or reverse proxy or gateway controller, because it's the bottleneck of all your incoming or outgoing
Mm-hmm.
traffic from your cluster to the internet. So everything goes into this bottleneck, right? So it's a good way to instrumentize this component, because with that you get telemetry of everything.
Yeah.
So that's what we have been doing in Traefik for years already. We had several integrations with metrics provider like Prometheus, like Datadog, like, I mean, there are dozens of that.
Mm-hmm.
We were also providing integrations with tracing tools, and we were also, of course, providing some logs, some access logs. So that's I mean, a lot of data and a lot of different format to deal with, and of course, a lot of vendors, and no one agrees on the format. So that was quickly a mess and quickly hard to follow. And that's how OpenTelemetry was born. It was born on the ideal to create a unified format for
Mm-hmm.
everything which has to do with observability. So
Yep.
it covers metrics, it covers tracing, and it covers logs. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea for each of these components is to provide a unified API, a unified format, and, and a unified way to collect all those data. So that's just great. And we with Traefik v3 we integrated OpenTelemetry, which came in a final stage recently. So Traefik v3 is fully compliant with this new standard, which allows you to I mean, super quickly and in a unified way expose your logs, your metrics, your tracing to whatever the tool you use in your company, right? You could use Jaeger, you could use anything else to handle your traces. With Hotel, it will handle everything. So that's just great.
That's awesome.
That's a great progress.
Yeah, that's awesome. For folks that don't know, and I appreciate your summary of OpenTelemetry, definitely take a look at OpenTelemetry. That's another very active upstream project within the CNCF. And I might get my stats wrong, but I think it was in the top 5 most active projects last year
Yeah.
in the Kubernetes community and the CNCF community, because there's a massive desire to have the collection of metrics, traces, and logs to be in a similar format, and then having the visualization and the correlation be up to you to decide what's important for alarming and dashboarding that telemetry data for your needs. And you're right. I talk to a lot of customers where they have visibility within their cluster environment, maybe the nodes, the services running there, the pods. They have visibility with respect to the underlying hosts, but they enable tracing, and there's gaps. And there's gaps in terms of understanding the full traffic coming from the user all the way through the ingress, which often is the invisible component, and then they see all the tracing once it's within the cluster. And so it's very important to have your gateway controller, your gateway proxy infrastructure. It's important for it to be able to output trace IDs, so that you can correlate these transactions or this traffic coming in all the way through from the user all the way through to your backend services and then back out again, to figure out what the root cause of any kind of issue, right? And oftentimes, we talk a lot about when it comes to observability, you need to figure out and work backwards from what matters to your application, to your end user. And so you're going to distill thousands of metrics and other telemetry down to what's important. And oftentimes, like the front end latency, the response time, the processing time, error codes for are the things that our customers choose or users choose to trigger their alarms. And when the alarm strikes, they have to figure out where the actual root cause is. So I'm really excited, and thank you for integrating OpenTelemetry into V3. That's going to help a lot of the folks make sure that they get a complete picture of what's going on.
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to point out that. Okay, I just completely forgot my thought. Never mind. If it comes back, I'll bring it up.
So you're just showing the configuration there. So it's very easy in V3 to enable metrics tracing endpoints.
Okay, exactly. Yeah, I mean it's extremely straightforward, and usually it's a good place to start. For example, if you want to add tracing to your cluster, I mean clearly. A reverse proxy is a good place to start, because instrumenting to all your application with tracing is not necessarily easy.
Correct.
But with the ingress controller, it's easier.
Yes. That being said, OpenTelemetry is also focused on making auto instrumentation easier as well. So if you already start doing that now, it supposedly will only get easier as time goes on, as more people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very cool.
Do we have time for yet again another episode we could totally have, right? We could have the OpenTelemetry on Traefik episode. We could dive in and see what it looks like. How do you set it up? What does it look? Because if you're new to OpenTelemetry, you maybe I don't know if Traefik would be the first thing that you turn on, but why not?
Sure.
if you're still on, I've seen cases where people actually, based on my advice, they don't move to the latest metrics tracing and logging solutions when they're doing their container migration. And it's hard to believe it. Yes, there are still plenty of people migrating to containers in 2024. But I always talk about don't try to boil the ocean. And one of those things is, we're doing Kubernetes. Now we need new logging. Now we need new monitoring solutions. Now we need to have a tracing solution and APM. And I'm like, okay, let's just do one thing. So this might be a way where you could put in Traefik for those that aren't yet using OpenTelemetry, and then just flip the bit later, turning it and knowing that you're setting up yourself for success with the cluster orchestration stuff. Sorry, Nirmal, I was gonna do the last few bits and
go for it.
Wrap up. Let's talk real quick about the future. You're CTO now. So
yep.
What are your plans? What is the community plans for the projects? What are plans for Proxy 3.1?
All right, let's start with Traefik 3.1. We are currently working on finalizing the integration with Gateway API to make it fully compliant. So it's a final touches that should land, let's say, by the end of June or early July. And with that, we will be, fully Gateway API compliant with. Again, this is a very active specification, so you need to keep up, right?
Yes.
So that's one thing. And the next big thing we wanted to work on are all about performances. I talk about that in the webinar we had lately, and I briefly showed a quick demo of that. We have been working on re-implementing the reverse proxy pipeline from scratch on Traefik, and to give you an idea, we have 30% better performance between Traefik 2 and 3. So that's a huge gap, and it allows Traefik to be even better than Nginx. That's kind of something.
Yeah, that's definitely
So
something.
yeah, we have been working on that since for quite some time. It needs to be merged in the master, but it should be done like in the next few months, and hopefully land in 3.2, for example.
That's
Awesome.
pretty amazing. Yeah, I saw that headline somewhere on your website, and I mean, it's funny how we don't appreciate the millisecond, like milliseconds and nanoseconds. Like we don't think about that too often. But when you're talking about at scale, which I hate to say that word on this show, but at scale,
It matters.
all these things matter. Nirmal
Yeah,
lives in at scale. I live in solo
I
DevOps
do.
land.
And it matters.
Yeah,
Every little piece of the chain of a request matters. So 30% performance improvement gain. That's an impressive achievement. I want to. That's not easy to do. So shout out to all the hard work
to the,
in the
to the
community
performance
to get that
team.
done. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like
Yeah.
I like to say, someone told me once, you don't have a performance problem unless you have a performance problem. So like the performance team is like they're the unsung heroes because just kind
Absolutely.
of like the quality team. It's like everyone complains when there's bad performance or bugs, but the people that made it all those things go away and solve those problems, nobody cheers about, hey, I installed your product and it worked as expected. Good job, team. Like no one really does that. So we appreciate you people. In case you're watching this show. So you mentioned on the list outstanding community contributions. You put that in the itinerary, or somebody did. Is there someone that you want to call out, or a group of people that you want to thank?
I mean, yeah, especially the one, for example, who've been working on amazing features. I talk about that early in the show, but Wasm was mostly managed by the community. And when you see such a big feature coming from the community with a bunch of people collaborating, I mean, personally, I think it's fascinating. So I'm always amazed by that coming from nowhere and landing in a release. So yeah, Wasm is just huge. So thank you to people who have contributed to that. Thank you to people who have contributed to OpenTelemetry support also. So we got some great help, and there are dozens of other features that came into Traefik 3 or come every day into the project from the community. So yeah, I mean, it's just so big for this project. So thank you.
Awesome.
Nice. All right, people.
I don't
you
think
heard
we
it.
spend enough time. I
Oh,
don't
go
think
ahead.
we spend
Sorry.
enough time thanking all the folks. So thank you out there.
Yeah.
It's thank you for contributing to Upstream.
Yeah. There's some of these high end projects that. Do you remember the last stat you put out about like your top 10 on Docker Hub? Top 5?
Top 15. Top 15.
Top 15? Okay. Yeah. So you're
But-
already up. You're up there with like all these other products that have been out for 20 or 20 plus years that we all use daily. And I'm assuming that even includes the distros because how could you be more popular than Ubuntu or whatever? Like so that's actually a really impressive statistic in and of itself. The fact that it's not even a decade old and it's already this level of popularity. So for those of you listening, obviously you just listened to a whole hour plus of everything about Traefik 3, why you should be using Traefik. If you're not, you can tell that we're all fans here. Like I said, in my Discord server, tons of people use it. Tons of people recommend it. It's an easy way to get started. You can use it with Docker and then with Compose and then with Swarm and then Kubernetes. It's the only proxy that I know of that can support all of those things. And I was actually kind of nervous that 3.0 was going to drop Swarm support. So thank you so much for. I know that was a lot of work to split it out, put it, and keep support for it. And I know there's a nice little pocket of the internet that really appreciates you all continuing with the Swarm support. People, you can get it on Docker Hub. You can get it at Traefik.io. It's everywhere. It's on GitHub. Go like it like the repo on GitHub so that we can hit the 50,000. I'd like this show to be the reason they hit 50,000. So if you're listening,
would be great.
Yeah, go. I mean, if you're following my strategy for GitHub stars, if you've been to the repo, you star it. Like that's my MO. So like I appreciate open source. I'm going to like you, even if I maybe don't know what you're about yet. So go there, check it out. There's a lot of information. Obviously, they have great docs. I'm constantly in their docs. I have like Docker docs open, Kubernetes docs open, and then Traefik is like one of the other 2 or 3 that I always have a tab open when I'm developing some new orchestration solution.
Yes.
You know, so go check it out.
Yes.
Thanks, Emile. This has been fun.
Thanks a lot for having me. That was a real pleasure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we'll have you on the show for 4.0 in 6 months. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'm excited to hear about the new. I'm excited to play with it. Quite honestly, I was kind of waiting for this show before I dug in and started considering how I'm going to update the courses, all my examples. I have examples going back to 2017. I still think I even have some V1 examples that I'm still holding on to in my repos that I would put in my old conference talks and stuff that I haven't updated yet. So this is just another reminder that my shit's getting old. I need to update it. But where should people come and hang out? Like, where can people find the Traefik community?
I mean, we have a forum on community.traefik.io, which is super active, and GitHub. And I guess those are the 2 main PCs to meet the community, I guess.
All right.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thanks. Hey, for those of you out there still watching, thanks for sticking with us. We do this every Thursday live. Nirmal and I will be back next week, sadly without Emile. Aw. You're not going to be here every week from now on, but we will probably mention the word Traefik because next week is a Q&A, which means we answer all your questions for possibly hours, depending on the energy level that we have. We get lots of questions, and we will almost certainly get some proxy question, and we'll talk about Traefik. So come back on Thursdays, 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. You can find us in the podcast, in the newsletter. By the way, upcoming shows, we're going to have an ML Ops episode. So next week, Nirmal and I are back here doing Q&A, but the week after that, I'm just going to bring this up just to confirm that I'm not incorrect. We're having Maria Vektomova on. She is a ML operator for machine learning,
Awesome.
And we're going to have her on to start digging into what it even means to be an engineer focused on machine learning operations. So we're going to talk about Kubernetes. We're going to talk about GPUs. I'm going to learn tons because I've never been an ML op person. So I'm really excited about that episode. And we have a whole bunch of other stuff coming in the future. So please stay tuned. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Emile. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.